Albert Suárez is here to stay. Heston Kjerstad is here for now, and Austin Hayes may not be here for much longer. We'll talk about what it all means for the Orioles coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 4-2 win over the Angels late Monday night in Anaheim, get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including another great start from Albert Suárez and the Orioles swinging the bat at the right times. Then we will chat about the big roster moves that the Orioles made on Monday. Austin Hayes heading to the 10-day injured list, really at the wrong time, what that means for his future outlook, and replacing him is one of the other Orioles' top hitting prospects. Heston Kjerstad is joining the big league team for the first time this year. I'll chat about what his role could be and how long he could truly stick around. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. So let's start today with an Orioles victory as they continue the sweepless streak and they win the opener of a 3-game series in Anaheim on Monday night. Final score, the Orioles 4 and the Los Angeles Angels 2. The O's with the win get to 15-7, and coupled with a Yankees 2-0 loss to the A's earlier in the day on Monday, now sit all alone in first place in the AL East through 22 games. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' victory over the Angels on Monday night. The first thing you need to know is Albert Suárez has done it again. In his second start in an Oriole uniform, after the O's called him up to take Tyler Wells' spot in the rotation last week after the Wells injury, Suárez went 5 2/3 scoreless against the Minnesota Twins, earned himself another start in Anaheim on Monday, and he basically did the same thing again, a little bit of a different way that he went about it, but did the same thing. 5 2/3 scoreless once again for Albert Suárez. He allowed 4 hits. He struck out 5. He walked 2. He threw 89 pitches in the outing. And the Angels, squared him up a little bit. 9 hard hit balls against him in 5 2/3 innings. But he kept them off balance. He mixed speeds. He mixed pitches just enough. He truly does pitch like a 34-year-old veteran. Now, not as much of a guy who hasn't been to the big league since 2017, but you can tell he worked on his craft, perfected his craft in Japan, in Korea over the past few years. And the Orioles might have really found something here. Now, it's still too early, even through 2 starts, to definitively say, this is a guy for the O's, to definitively say, he's going to be in the rotation for the long haul. But I think at this point, even if, as the O's get healthier with Means and Bradish and Wells coming back, even if that does bump Suárez into the bullpen at some point, in May, he's earned a spot at least on this Orioles roster for the time being, because the stuff is too good to not keep him on this roster. Now, the fastball was good once again, and that was the pitch he went to set down the Twins over and over again last week, and that was still his most used pitch. 50 of his 89 offerings were that 4-seam fastball, which was 94-96 on Monday night. However, it was the changeup that really impressed me Monday. Now, the fastball still got 8 whiffs, but the changeup was really the pitch that had the Angels fooled. That was his number 2 most used offering, 22 changeups on the night. He had 4 whiffs on 12 swings. They had a lot of soft contact against that changeup. He would drop it in the strike zone pretty much whenever he wanted. Got 5 called strikes on that pitch. And we didn't really see a lot of it against the Twins. Against the Twins, he was mostly fastball cutter. It's kind of an extended cutter it's a cutter slider hybrid, really, is what Suárez throws. But that's mostly what we saw. Now, we still saw that pitch, and we saw more curveballs against the Twins. This time, it was changeup. He was getting righties. He was getting lefties with the changeups. He was striking out Mike Trout. Just another weapon in the bag. It was a lot of good fastball movement, good fastball velocity, but you add that changeup, and now Suárez is on another level. And I don't know what the long-term outlook still looks like for him, but I'll tell you right now, he has earned another start 5 days from now for the Orioles. I can tell you that much. So whether they want to, start him Saturday or Sunday or whatever it may be coming up this weekend or next week, like he has earned another one. What an ad by the Orioles, at least to this point. I mean, 16 whiffs, just mowing down the Angels when he needed to. Second thing you need to know from Monday night's win is that James McCann and Colton combined to continue the home run party for the Orioles that's been this season, the team that is leading the major leagues in long balls. James McCann got the scoring started in the second inning for the O's with a solo shot off of Angels starter Reed Detmers, 102.4 miles per hour off the bat, 377 feet down the line, just snuck it inside the pole in left field to give the O's a 1-0 lead. And for McCann, it's been a little bit, but he finally did hit his first home run of the season. And funny enough, McCann was the guy who kind of went out and got the new hydration station, the new home run celebration, and he had to wait a while to use it, but finally does go yard. McCann also, I thought, caught a really good game behind the plate as well. And then Colton Cowser kind of bookended the game offensively for the Orioles. Cowser hitting a solo shot in the seventh that at that point put the Orioles up 4-0. Also came off Detmers. And surprisingly enough, I mean, Reed Detmers has been a top 5 starting pitcher in baseball so far this season. Coming into the start, he had dominated the Orioles when he faced them in Baltimore in the opening series of the year. Those were the first 2 home runs Detmers has allowed all season. The one to McCann in the second, and then to Cowser in the seventh. Cowser goes lefty-lefty home run, 104 miles per hour off the bat, 394 feet to right center field. The crack of the bat on that Cowser home run, that was quite a sound. It didn't have like the height where you're like, oh my God, it wasn't a no-doubter, but that sound of the bat, I was like, I think that thing is gone, and it got over the yellow line in right center field for a home run. Cowser stays hot. McCann continues to swing it well against lefties. Even though they only scored 4 runs in this game, O's offense still humming. And a couple other guys who helped them continue to hum as we get to the third thing you need to know is that those young stars at the top of the order reminded you on Monday night, do not forget about us. Yes, Jordan Westburg just won American League Player of the Week. Yes, the week before, Colton Cowser won American League Player of the Week. Like, those guys are dominating headlines right now for the Orioles offense. But don't forget about Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman, hitting 1-2 per usual in the O's lineup on Monday, and each of them with 2 hits. Gunnar with a 2 for 4. He had a triple and a run scored. Adley Rutschman also a 2 for 4, a double, a single, and 2 RBIs. His RBI single made it 2-0 in the third inning, and then his RBI double to score Henderson made it 3-0 in the fifth inning. Gunnar's just been awesome. Adley, the walks aren't there for some reason this year, but he's now hitting 307 on the season, so you will certainly still take that. And those 2 guys continue to kind of be the anchors at the top of this order, despite all the other young talent that the Orioles have in this lineup. Fourth thing you need to know from Monday win is that, quite frankly, Mike Baumann, I think, has pushed me to the brink. Now, if you've listened or watched this show for a while, you know that I generally don't jump on players for poor performance too much. It takes me a while to really be just calling for the, listen, like, it's not working out, we got to move on here situation. I've generally given players the benefit of the doubt, maybe even too long of a string. Like, I've probably given guys way too long of a string to figure things out. There has been many players who have kind of pushed me over the edge in terms of just watching them perform. The last one I can really remember where it was like, yeah, we got to do something here, was when the Orioles had signed Chris Owings at the beginning of the 2022 season to a minor league deal, and then had basically rostered him for 2 months, and he just could not hit a baseball. And I was like, what are we doing here? And they finally did DFA him and gave Mateo more at-bats and got Henderson up there eventually, and the team got better, right? I'm starting to get there with Mike Baumann. It's not as bad as Chris Owings was at the beginning of that season, and he's pulled off a couple of nice outings coming into Monday. He got a huge out in the 8th inning that helped the Orioles win that crazy game Saturday in Kansas City, and he's had some outings where he's been scoreless and struck out the side, and we know how good he was in the first half of the season out of the Oriole bullpen last year, but he was a disaster down the stretch last year, optioned to AAA. There was a reason he was not on the Orioles postseason roster, and he makes the team this year because he's out of options, and he had a really good spring. And it's just been kind of a disaster. And even the 5.59 ERA for Mike Baumann doesn't even show how bad he's been. Like, I think he's been worse than that ERA. at least when you've watched him out there. And Baumann came in for Albert Suárez on Monday night, runner on first and 2 down in the 6th. Then he gets a big strikeout to end the inning, keep the Orioles up 3-0. That was the only batter he had faced. The O's added a run in the top of the 7th, and you're like, 4-0 lead. Baumann's only faced a batter. This would be a nice time for Baumann to settle in, maybe get us a nice scoreless 7th, regain his confidence, and get us to the back end of the bullpen. And he just did not do that at all. Serves up a meaty fastball to Joe Adell, who crushes one to right field for a solo homer to get the Angels on the board, make it 4-1. Then he allows a single. Then he completely loses all command of the plate and just I'll say a pretty terrible walk to Ari Adrianza, who was just recalled by the Angels on Monday to start that game. I mean, I feel like it's been a couple of years since he's been in the big leagues, and Baumann just nowhere close to the zone to him in a spot where you don't have to be super careful. And he comes out of the game, and it's becoming tough to watch. Like, the stuff is good. He's got a good fastball. It has solid ride. It's 96 to 98, but that thing just gets crushed because he has no command of it. The knuckle curve can be good. I mean, he still hasn't given up a hit on the slider this year, but he's only thrown it 34 times because he generally doesn't know where it's going. So I just look at what Mike Baumann brings, and I get why he's here, right? He was a top Orioles pitching prospect, and they like the stuff, and he's out of options. And if you do DFA Mike Baumann, the stuff is good enough that 100% another team is going to claim him. The Orioles will lose him flat out if they do put him on waivers and decide to move on from him. And there's no one forcing him out yet, but John Means, Kyle Bradish, Cena Perez, Tyler Wells, these guys are going to be healthy pretty soon and need to come back to the Orioles, and they're going to need to clear roster space. And you look at this bullpen right now, and it's just like, it feels like to me, Mike Baumann's got to be the first guy to go. And he can't put it together. There's no consistency. He gets hit way too hard. He's errant in the zone, which means instead of like, oh, he walks a million guys, he just tries to throw a fastball in the corner, and instead it ends up right down the middle. Like, that's when he gives up a lot of his hard contact. It's just tough to watch. And I like what Mike Baumann's done for the Orioles in the past. I used to be a big believer in him, but I've seen enough of a sample size at the big league level where I just think when the next guy comes back, whether it's Wells or Means or Bradish or whoever it may be, I just feel like it's going to be tough to DFA him and know you're going to lose him, but I just feel like Baumann's got to be that next guy to go. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 4-2 win over the Angels on Monday night is that, luckily for Baumann, the rest of the bullpen came in and picked him up. Yennier Cano came in first and second, nobody out in the 7th, gets a huge double play. Now, he did then allow an RBI single to Nolan Schanuel, but he got Mike Trout to ground out to end the 7th and keep it at a 4-2 game. Cano stayed in there, got the first 2 outs of the 8th inning before coming out. Really huge 5 outs for Cano. Jacob Webb then comes in and gets Mickey Moniak to fly out to end the 8th. That was the only batter Webb faced, but Webb's got a 1.86 ERA this year. And Jacob Webb, who is a right-hander, but throws a good slider and a really good changeup at times as well, has kind of been another pitcher who's been able to get lefties out for Brandon Hyde this year. That's kind of how he used him on Monday night. It was a lefty due up against Cano, and generally at that point you'd say, oh, you go to a lefty out of the pen. No, he went to a righty out of the pen. But lefties are now 1 for 13 against Jacob Webb this season after the Moniak flyout, and he's kind of becoming a guy who can get lefties, and that makes him even more valuable to this Oriole bullpen right now. They went to Craig Kimbrell in the 9th. He got the save to pass Billy Wagner, become all alone, 423 saves, 7th on the all-time list. It was probably the most nerve-wracking save that Kimbrell's had so far this season for the Orioles. In his 34th batter he faced this year, he finally issued his first walk of the season, which loaded the bases with 1 out after a hit by pitch and a little flare single. But Kimbrell bears down, gets Schanuel to pop out in the infield, and then it was the moment on Monday night, it felt like, in Major League Baseball in terms of how tense it was. Future Hall of Famer Craig Kimbrell versus future Hall of Famer Mike Trout. Bases loaded, 2 outs in a 4-2 game in the bottom of the 9th. And Trout did not take the bat off his shoulder. Kimbrell strikes him out looking with back-to-back fastballs just painted at the top of the zone at 95 to end the inning and get the O's win. I said it before the season, Kimbrell's not going to be pretty or fun to watch sometimes, but he's going to get the job done more times than not. That's certainly been the case. He gets another save. He's got an ERA below 1, and the Orioles take the opener from the Angels. But this Orioles lineup on Monday as well, it looked a little different. Ryan Mountcastle was out with a little bit of knee issues. Seems like he'll be okay, but just needed the day off. So you had, some mixing and matching. James McCann was catching. Ramon Arias was hitting fifth and played first base for the first time this season. Mateo was in there. You had some guys moved around. And the lineup here on Tuesday night could look different again because the Orioles have added another one of their top prospects as they are reportedly going to call up Heston Kjerstad here on Tuesday. So coming up next, we'll talk about why they made the move and how long Kjerstad can really hang around and what his role will be for the time being in Baltimore. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. I've talked about Game Time. This is the easiest way for me to buy tickets to Orioles games. It truly is. And Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and even easier. Prices on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. I've seen multiple Orioles games because I will buy tickets on the Game Time app while I'm standing outside of Camden Yards using their last minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And that includes the Baltimore Orioles. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And today's episode of the Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Policygenius. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius, they really help you compare your options. That's really important here as well. They give you the top companies, and their team of licensed experts are just on hand at any time to help talk you through it. So you can talk to a team of award-winning agents who will truly walk you through the process step by step. And that makes you feel really good about a big decision that you will be making over at Policygenius. They give you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonmlb or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonmlb. So the Orioles got the win 4-2 over the Angels on Monday night, but they also had some big news come out before Monday's game. Those were some roster moves due to some injuries. And Jacob Calvin-Meyer of the Baltimore Sun first reported the big part of that news, and that is Heston Kjerstad is reportedly joining the Orioles on Tuesday, going to be called up and activated for the first time this season. Kjerstad, a consensus top 100 prospect, one of the top 5 prospects in the Orioles system, who made his major league debut late last year in September, helped the O's with some big hits, actually made the O's postseason roster, but mostly due to how amazing Colton looked coming into 2024, Kjerstad did not win an opening day roster spot and has been in AAA to begin the season. But he's coming to Baltimore because, unfortunately, Austin Hayes is headed to the 10-day injured list, and we will get to that in just a moment. But that opened up the roster spot, and reportedly, Heston Kjerstad is going to fill it. Now, Kjerstad, he's certainly earned the call-up with the opening coming. And I've talked about this before. People keep asking, like, how are they going to get Kjerstad onto this major league roster with Mountcastle performing, with O'Hearn performing, with Santander here, with Cowser performing? And I basically said, look, it's going to take an injury, at least at this point, to get Kjerstad to the majors. And that is what it took here in late April. Hayes goes down, Kjerstad comes up, and he certainly earned being the first guy to get that promotion. In 102 plate appearances in AAA so far this season for Heston Kjerstad, he is hitting .349 with a .431 on base and a .744 slugging percentage, leading the Tides with 10 home runs in 102 plate appearances. That is absurd. That is basically a home run every 3 games is what he's doing right now. He has a 189 WRC plus, really good 12% walk rate, and the 22% strikeout rate, it's not that bad in AAA either. Now, he has faced some lefties. I know some people are wondering how's he done against lefties. 5 for 21, 3 singles, a double, a homer, 7 strikeouts, 2 walks in 25 plate appearances against left-handed pitching in AAA. That doesn't tell you a whole lot. But what he is doing is mashing the baseball. 91.6 mile per hour average exit velocity, a 52% hard hit rate for Kjerstad in AAA so far this year. Listen, I agreed with the O's not calling him up before this because there was just no room. But as soon as there's an injury, again, he was the guy who had earned that spot, and he gets it. Now, it is a little bit of an interesting swap out. Now, you're going outfielder for outfielder, which is nice, and that's what you're generally going to do when someone gets hurt, bring up someone else who plays a similar position. But Hayes and Kjerstad are very different players. Austin Hayes is your good outfielder, right? Can play all 3 outfield positions, is really good in left field. He's a right-handed hitter. He is not as much of a power guy. He's more of a, hit dunk in singles, dunk in doubles when he's going well. On the flip side, Heston Kjerstad is more of a masher, right? He is a home run hitter. He can play the corner outfields and first base, but you're never going to put him in center field. You don't fully trust him, I think, in the outfield just yet. And it's also a left-handed hitter versus a right-handed hitter. So you look at the role and you try to figure out, okay, what's going to happen here with Heston Kjerstad? Well, the first thing I'll let you know is Kjerstad is not going to play a whole lot. So just kind of understand that. Now, Brandon Hyde said before the game Monday that the way it's looking, and Hayes going on the IL with a calf injury, he said it looks like, and he's hoping that Hayes will only have to spend the minimum 10 days on the injured list, and then he will rejoin the Orioles. That is good news for the O's in general. You want a healthier team. It's not as great news for Kjerstad because there's a chance here, like at most, he's just here for 2 weeks and then he just goes right back down to AAA Norfolk. That's most likely what would happen unless another injury occurs to an outfielder or a first baseman between now and then. And Austin Hayes at this point was not playing much. I mean, he was in the short side of a platoon at best with Colton Cowser. Hayes had been struggling this year. Kjerstad will just kind of fill in those smaller number of at-bats that Hayes was getting. Like, do not expect Heston Kjerstad to play every day, and that's because there's just not room for him. Now, the reason I mentioned that Kjerstad will maybe or probably at least be in the lineup here on Tuesday night at Anaheim is that Ryan Mountcastle has a sore knee, and that is why he was not in the lineup Monday, even against a left-handed pitcher. You had to know something was going on. So the hope is that Mountcastle's fine, but I could see the Orioles giving Mountie one more day off on Tuesday night, and that's how you get Kjerstad in there, right? He just replaces Mountcastle, whether he's DHing or playing first base. Kjerstad jumps in there against a right-handed pitcher. That'll be a good way to get him back in the lineup. But then the O's face another lefty starter on Wednesday afternoon in the series finale. And Kjerstad probably sits there if Mountcastle's all right. Now, if Mountcastle has more of an extended absence, then Kjerstad could be in the lineup almost every day. But if Mountcastle ends up just needing, one other day off and he's good, it's really hard to get Kjerstad in there because at all the positions you could potentially play Kjerstad, you've got another hitter you need to get in the lineup. First base, Mountcastle. DH, Ryan O'Hearn. Right field, Anthony Santander. Left field, Colton Cowser. Even center field, if you're moving guys around, Cedric Mullins. You got to get all those guys in against right-handed pitching, and that leaves nowhere else for Kjerstad to play or at least start against a righty. So really what's going to happen for Kjerstad is I think, maybe they'll give Mountcastle the day off, and that might have gone some to why they called up Kjerstad here. If Mountie needs to miss a couple more days, Kjerstad will probably start then. But as soon as Mountcastle's back, I don't know if they want to play Kjerstad against lefties, and it's going to be tough to play him against righties. So truly, he might be mostly a pinch hitter while he's here. They'll start him a couple of times. I could even see them starting against a lefty because the O's have a little bit of a hole there for a DH against left-handed pitching, and maybe they give Kjerstad 1 or 2 shots to do that. But in general, it's going to be mostly a bench role, and you'll see him pinch hit from time to time, and maybe he'll get a couple of big hits. But I don't think this is going to be like Kjerstad's here. He's here to stay for a while. He's going to help this team a lot. This is really more of a patchwork where it's, hey, we need a bench guy, come off the bench and pitch hit, can replace Austin Hayes for 2 weeks. And then when Hayes returns again, if the rest of the team is healthy, it's just going to be Kjerstad that goes back down. Now, it doesn't mean that Kjerstad's not going to come back. I think more than likely he will come back at some point when the O's kind of figure out how they can get him in the lineup. But right now, too many guys in his positions are hitting well. There's just no place to play him regularly. So he'll help for a little bit, replace Mountie, replace Hayes. When those guys get healthy, it's probably going to be back to Austin Hayes and Kjerstad back to AAA. But the other question here is, what about Austin Hayes? Because it hasn't been going well so far this season, and it's now gone from bad to worse. So coming up next to finish off the pod, I'll talk about his IL stint, what it means for him, what it means for the team. Does this hurt even further his future with the Orioles? But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. Yeah, I'm a fairly competitive person, and the competitive side I have is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it is a great twist on Monopoly, where you play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is just messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. And now I can also heist their values of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. So we finish off today's episode with the chat about Austin Hays, because to open up that roster spot for Heston Kjerstad to reportedly join the Orioles on Tuesday, Hays went on the 10-day injured list. Orioles placing him, though, there with a left calf strain. He got the start on Saturday in Kansas City against left-hander Cole Ragans. It was actually having a pretty good game, and then all of a sudden was pulled out of the game, replaced in left field by Colton in the 7th inning. We were kind of unsure what had happened. The O's said after the game it was a calf issue. He didn't play Sunday, and then it became clear he wasn't going to be available Monday, and the Orioles thought it might be best for us, for our roster, to just put him on the injured list. And there's a chance that if Hays had not gone on the IL, he may have been ready in sooner than 10 days. But when the O's have so much young hitting talent in AAA that can come up and replace him and supplement the lineup, it almost makes more sense to say, hey, just go heal it for 10 days. We have somebody ready like Heston Kjerstad who can come up and produce if we need to. And then when you come back, your roster spot will be there. Now, surprisingly for Austin Hays, this is his first IL stint since 2021. Now, this is a guy who is consistently beat up, but he hasn't been on the IL in a long time. You can take that one of two ways. You can say, one, oh, he stayed healthier. That's allowed him to have at least good first halves and be an all-star last year. On the flip side, you could say he's been hurt enough at points in the second half the last 2 years that he should have gone on the injured list, and frankly, just seemed like he didn't want to. And that hurt his performance on the field. So it's nice knowing that he's actually going on the IL for this injury. Now, it is retroactive to Sunday instead of Monday, so he would be eligible to come off the IL next Wednesday. That is May 1st. Now, there's two issues here for Hays. The first issue is this would have been a week where he would have played for the Orioles. Monday would have begun a stretch where 3 out of the Orioles' next 5 games against both the Angels and the A's would have been against left-handed starters. And although Hays isn't a huge platoon guy, he had still been starting against lefties despite his struggles early in the year. He got the start Saturday against the lefty before coming out of the game. Like, he would have been in the starting lineup Monday night against Reed Detmers. The Orioles are facing another lefty, it looks like, on Wednesday. He would have been in the lineup then, and they'll face one lefty this weekend against Oakland. He would have played then too. So 3 out of 5 games, that's fairly regular playing time compared to what Hays has been getting the last couple of weeks. That would have been a huge spot for him, not just to try to turn things around, show, hey, I still have a role on this team. I can still hit. I'm out of the slump. But the issue is he was already breaking out of the slump. And that might be the worst part here in terms of the injury timing for Austin Hays. Like, yeah, the stats still didn't look good, but his at-bats were looking much, much better. And of his last 11 balls over the past week or so that Hays has put in play, 7 of those 11 have been hard hit balls, which means exit velocities over 95 miles per hour. I think he only had 2 of those in the first 2 weeks and change of the season. So he was looking much, much better at the plate. The results were starting to come a little bit, and you could tell they were going to start coming as long as he was getting a little more regular at-bats. And that chance was here this week with the 3 lefties. But now he loses all of those chances. And whenever he comes back, and hopefully Hyde is right, it's a minor injury. He'll be back in 10 days. And late next week, he rejoins the Orioles and Kjerstad goes back to AAA. But you've missed now that chance to play even more. And what is your role when you come back then? It just starts to open up more questions for the Orioles. He's already been relegated to a bench spot. Now he's out for 10 days. He's not playing. could his roster spot be slipping away even more? Again, he's going to have it when he gets activated and he will be re-added to the roster. And I don't think it means he's going to be DFA'd in May or something, but the playing time could go down even more. There's also a chance here, a much smaller chance, but a chance that, Hayes being out maybe allows Kjerstad to play a little more, or just gives Cowser more at-bats against lefties. Maybe Jackson Holiday gets a few more ABs against lefties, and some of these guys start to hit lefties even better where Hayes is out, and Hayes even kind of loses some of his platoon at-bats against left-handed starters because other guys are hitting them better. That's certainly possible. It's just bad timing for Austin Hayes. Been a bad season so far. I still believe he can bounce back this year, but it's just getting tougher and tougher and tougher with every break. Now, the rest of the roster moves that happened Monday, now the same thing happened with Austin Hayes that happened with Tyler Wells last week. The Orioles decided right before first pitch that Wells would go on the injured list. This time wasn't right before first pitch. This was a couple hours before. But of course, the Orioles are out in Anaheim. Tough to get guys from Norfolk out to Anaheim that quickly. So they did what they've done in the past when they do a late IL move, is that your taxi squad catcher who's with the team does end up just getting activated so you don't have to play one player down. And once again, the lucky man, David Banuelos, was out there with the Orioles. He gets activated after he had been activated last week, got his first major league at bat, got DFA'd. Well, he stayed with the O's. He cleared waivers. He stayed on the taxi squad. He traveled with the team to Anaheim, gets activated to the roster again. Now, the Orioles did have to open a 40-man spot for David Banuelos to be activated for the game. He did not appear in Monday night's game. So they did DFA Peyton Burdick, who's a right-handed hitting outfielder the O's acquired, then DFA, then acquired again earlier this offseason. He had been off to an okay start, I would say, in AAA Norfolk. Big power from the right side, plays good defense at all three outfield positions, but he has an incredibly large hole in his swing, and his strikeout numbers are insane. It is a gigantic strikeout problem. He's more of a long-term project for the Orioles. I do hope they're able to retain him, but the last time they DFA'd him, another team did claim him, and I would think that's probably a better than 50% chance he gets claimed again. I really like Peyton Burdick and his potential future, so I hope he either clears waivers or the Orioles can find a way to get him back at some point. At worst, he's just higher ceiling Ryan McKenna, and at best, he is a productive Austin Hayes replacement in the outfield for the O's. Now, the reason why they DFA'd him to make room for a third catcher for one day is because they feel Burdick is still expendable. They have so much outfield talent. Obviously, that makes sense. But I just personally like Peyton Burdick and hope he can stick in this organization. They can try and figure him out because the talent's there. Marlins couldn't find it. Hopefully the Orioles get him back, and they can. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being patient. Again, the schedule, the 9:30 games, it makes it tough to have those episodes up right away. But late morning here on Tuesday, not too bad. Schedule is going to change just a little bit for the rest of the week on the podcast. So there will be an episode in your feeds on Wednesday, but it will not be recapping Tuesday's game. That is because the late start, I've got another job. It's the timing just doesn't work out when the O's are on the West Coast during the week. So there will be an episode on Wednesday. Most likely, it's going to be a bit of a mailbag episode. So make sure to get your questions in. You can leave them right here in the comment section. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. You can also email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Also tweet us at Locked On Orioles. Send your mailbag questions. We'll talk a bit about Kyle Bradish's latest rehab start, what that means for the O's, and then get into the mailbag as well. Then on Thursday, we'll be recapping the last two games of the series. So Thursday's episode will have a recap of the Tuesday game and a recap of the Wednesday game in Anaheim. And then the O's will kind of come back home and we'll get back to that regular schedule of what goes on starting with Friday's episode. But again, we're back tomorrow. No game recap, but we'll be opening up the mailbag. So get your questions in. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.